Hello everyone and welcome back to the garage rebuild series. In the last part we finished running all of the electrical in the garage. Now in this part we're going to install the insulation and the drywall to cover up the walls. Stay tuned to see how I did it. I'm just trying to get all the last minute things done before I prepare for the drywall installation, hopefully starting this weekend or tomorrow. You can see I got all the walls, the insulation is completed all the way around, and I've been doing the ceiling, as you can see. One thing that occurred to me that I wanted to talk about a little bit is in attic spaces and roof venting and what to do about how you insulate based on the type of structure you have. Anytime you have a structure with a roof, that roof needs to breathe. The first part of the breathing process is the exhaust venting. Now there are different types of roof exhaust venting. My garage happens to have the ridge vent. My shed and my workshop have these passive, what I call turtle vents. But other roofs may have either active turtle vents or turbine vents or any combination of those. Either way, the purpose of exhaust venting is allow the hot, moist air to escape out of the roof so that it doesn't collect inside of it and mold or rot it. Now, in some cases, you also need a second type of venting in your roof, and that is to bring in new air. If your house has aluminum or vinyl siding, you most likely have perforated soffits at the bottom of the roof to bring in air from the outside. Or in older homes like mine, you may have gable vents. When you have an attic that's closed off from the house, you really need this fresh air to create an air current in the attic, which will incentivize the hot, moist air to escape out of the exhaust vent. Now, neither my garage, my workshop, or even my shed have any type of fresh air intake, so there's no perforated soffits or gable vents or anything. Well, the reason is because they don't really need it. If a structure doesn't have an attic, it doesn't really need that makeup air because it could use the large volume of air that's inside of the entire structure to vent the air out. Also, if the structure doesn't have full-time air conditioning or heat, there's no major temperature differential, especially when you're air conditioning, so there's probably not as much moisture buildup in the attic. Now, my garage is going to be kind of in between. Now that I'm walling off the attic and enclosing it as a smaller space, I am creating this attic, but like I said, I won't be full-time conditioning the garage, besides maybe the occasional diesel heater in the cold. But I do want to make sure that I don't have any moisture problems in the inside of my roof. So what I decided to do is put some venting in my ceiling to provide for that intake air into my attic. I'll show you more about these pass-through vents once the drywall is installed. Well, it's drywall day and I'm excited. I got all this drywall picked up and moved into the garage here. You can see I already actually started it. Just so you know, drywall wasn't my first choice of materials. I looked at several other materials like different types of siding that you can use in garages, plastic, PVC, metal, all sorts of things. And I sort of just fell back onto the tried and true drywall just because it's so cheap at $10 for 32 square feet or a 4x8 sheet. It's hard to beat that. The idea behind the drywall, and I'm not doing it the way my original plan was, the way the cleating is all working and the cornering is all working is I should be doing the ceiling first, then the back and front walls, and then the side walls after that. And that's only because of how much cleaning you have in the corners and all that. Because I don't have my muscle, I'm going to have 4 people to help me get these pieces up on the ceiling. And that's not going to happen until tomorrow, but I want to get a little bit done today just with my wife and I. So what we ended up doing is doing just these end wall pieces just so we can start working in the sidewall pieces here. The way I measured it up is this is actually more than 12 feet. So once I get another 4-foot piece up here, that'll be 12 feet. I still have another 4 inches of gap there. So I'll end up having to patch in 4 inches anyway at the top. So that's what's going to happen. But I've got a couple different materials here. Notice that this corner here, I mentioned I'm going to make a 8-foot bench out of those shop bench or shelving and benching materials. But notice that what I did here is instead of a piece of drywall, I got a 3/4 inch thick what's called a slat board. So you've seen this at stores all the time, right? You know, all the walls. So Slatboard, they make all sorts of hooks and baskets and different configurations. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have a 36-inch rail here, and then one in the middle, and then another one. And I'm going to have 4-foot sections, and that's going to make a bench top 36 inches up. I hung this about 40 inches up just to give me a little bit of room. I might, you know, notice how bad my gapping is here. I'm probably frame that out with a little furring strip there. But that'll give me 8 feet over the bench for all sorts of tool hangers. And I'll talk about tool organization later. I haven't quite figured that all out, but what I have figured out is that's what I'm going to do. Tomorrow I'm going to have my bigger crew here, and you know, my son, my wife, and my other friend, and we're going to try to tackle this ceiling because I can't find 4 adults to work with me all day on this. Just having scheduling issues with friends and my family. I decided to rent this lift, and honestly, even if I could get some adults, after doing these pieces on the wall, it's a struggle to try to get. You'd have to have 2 people on the ground, 2 people on the scaffolding, handing things up, holding things up. You're on this narrow catwalk. Anybody can slip and fall with the wrong move. I just feel like even with 4 people here, it would be unsafe to do drywall on the ceiling that way. So I rented a drywall lift. It's about $50 a day rental. This one has an extension arm on it, so we can get up to above 11 feet. So this should be able to hit my 12.5 foot approximate ceiling anyway. So I'm going to use this and see how this works and move forward. Hopefully I'll get this ceiling done in one day. Well, if ever there was a tool to do drywall on the ceiling, this is it. I already got my first piece up. Now notice that where I ended it, I just put the full 8-foot sheet up, and where I ended it about 6 inch past the stud. On my walls, I was careful never to do that, right? So if I end a piece, it's got to be right on the middle of the stud so that the next piece can start on the same stud and move forward. Even like in places where I ended up going over, what I would do is I put the piece in, and if I went over the stud but not quite to the next one, I would just get to the middle of the stud and, like in this case, and then screw it in on the sides and then zip cut it so that I have that half a stud to start the next piece. Now on the ceiling, I'm not doing that. Now the reason is because on the walls it's very important because you create weak points, right? If you join your drywall up in between a stud, if you push on that, it's a real weak point. It could dent in. But on the ceiling, especially a 12-foot ceiling, how likely is it that someone will be touching that? You know what I mean? So that's why I'm not too concerned. But the problem that it does cause is that when you meet up your next piece of drywall, depending on, you know, how level your ceiling joists are, it might not match up right, and your taping job will be a nightmare. And I basically just cut up a bunch of 6-inch 1x4 scrap. I've got tons of it out there that I happen to have, just cheap 1x4 scrap like pallet wood or whatever it was. Cut it into 6-inch blocks and then just screw in one block to the drywall. And then the next piece, when it goes over it, I'll screw that in, and that will help line up. I might need a piece on the end or depending, but that'll help line up the seam and strengthen that seam so I don't have issues taping. But otherwise, yes, it's a weak point, but it's on the ceiling, and I'm not as concerned because it's just highly unlikely anything will actually push on it. That'll make going much quicker, not having to, you know, measure and cut and do all that, and just be able to just put up full sheets and just move forward quickly. That'll help out with that. That's the process there, and I'm going to continue to move on. Little progress shot here. I've got 3 panels put in. That last panel I don't need the hoist for. And I got the lights cut out, outlet cut out. I've got all my I kind of rearranged my blocking there. Screwed all those little 6-inch 1x4 blocks at the ends and marked everything ready for my next row. So far it's going all right. I'll keep plugging away. Well, I am back and it is quite echoey in here with this drywall, but as you can see, I've got it all hung. The ceiling, the walls, and all the way around the front. Now I did use a few different materials here. I mentioned that I have one panel of slatboard that replaces some of the drywall. I also used this thin 1/8 of an inch thick hardboard material here. And the reason for that is just on the front wall here, I didn't want to do drywall because it's so thick and you would see all the edges of it. And it would also be really difficult just to get around all this stuff and behind all this stuff. So I used this 1/8 inch hardboard, and this hardboard has a glossy white finish on it. Notice that I left out the entire header. And the reason for that is in the entire center of it, there is no ledging really for the drywall or for the wallboard there. So I couldn't really go down to this because it's just basically the trim on top of the header. So I left that all open. I'm probably just going to sand it up and paint it, just clean it up and paint it white, but that'll be exposed. But I was able to get the wallboard behind the spring and everything. Speaking of that wallboard, I ran a little bit short on like one of these pieces. I had to buy a whole other 4x8 sheet, and most of it I didn't need. So what I did was I took a 5x4 and cut off, and I put it over the drywall here and just nailed it in, and then I rigged up a little thing to push the scaffolding into the center there to hold it in there while the liquid nails adhesive dry. But that's basically all I did. Was I took a sheet of that, used liquid nails adhesive to adhere it to here, and then put a little of this trim that they sell with the wallboard around it. And what's nice about this stuff is it's, like I said, that glossy white finish acts as a whiteboard. So now I have this humongous whiteboard that not only covers some seams and I don't have to do some drywall work, but I can write on any of those surfaces. I also put a couple of those sheets over that OSB just to clean that up and make it white. But that's cool because I can write all over this stuff and I can leave notes for myself or do whatever. So that's kind of a nice little bonus there. Now in the ceiling took me forever. That's why I cut this video. I haven't finished the taping. As you can see, I just did a little bit right there. I've got a lot of taping work to do, probably 12 hours of taping. So I'm gonna cut the video here because that's gonna take me another few weeks. But I didn't make it easy on myself by putting can lights in. So I got those 7 can lights in, including that one over there. I've got that little hatch that I made. I'll just paint that white. And also, if you recall, I was creating some vents to go through my insulation in the ceiling so that I can allow airflow up through the ceiling. As you can see, they kind of look like the can lights, but that's what one of them looks like. What I ended up doing is just 4 of them. I was going to do more, but I just decided to four would be enough for now. If I need one, one later, I've got one here. So that, I think that'll be sufficient. That's plenty of airflow. Those directly open up. I cut away the insulation. You can't really see, but they directly open up right into the attic there. And we have 4 big 6-inch vents there. So I think that'll be good. Now I messed up on one. I actually cut that one out there because what I tried to do is corner them on the blocking and the ceiling joist. So you have the ceiling joist going this way and I have blocking going this way, as you saw in my last video. So I tried to corner them on there so that I can screw them in with my right angle drill bit, to screw in a couple of screws into the joist there to hold them in. Well, I cut this one out and realized that my conduit was right above it. And so that didn't work out. The good thing about doing that is if you cut it out with a hole saw, it's easy to patch. You just take a piece of 1x4 and tip it in there and put it in flat over the back of the hole, screw that in to hold it. Then you just take your piece that you cut out and you mud all around the outside, basically screw it in, then tape it and patch it back up. So one more coat of drywall compound and that will be completely hidden, but that was the only major mistake I made. But as you can see, it is difficult to get around an already installed garage door. Yes, it would have been a lot easier to have the garage door installed first and then do the drywall, rather than what I had to do after the fact, but that wasn't in the cards for me, so I did what I had to do by using that wallboard and just kind of cutting around the rails. So that's good enough, you know, for a garage. As far as finishing it, that's going to be on the next video. Well, the next video, I'll probably just combine me building out this wall here with storage, you know, workbench I mentioned, tool storage, and kind of show you the end result there, as well as the finished board. But I don't plan on doing a really great job with the finishing. This is probably going to be about it, just a single coat. Maybe if I can see, in some problem areas, I'll put a second coat on. Single coat, minimal sanding, just a 6-inch blade. That's good enough. Yes, there'll be dimples and divots and things like that, but for a garage, that's enough for me. The main purpose of this wallboard is to make everything white after I prime and paint it, so that there's no dark spots in my garage like I had before. And so basically I've retooled everything now. You know, I've started doing a little bit of there, but I've retooled everything. I've got my drywall compound. I got my tape. What I like to do is paper tape up on the, you know, corners, you know, because the paper tape can fold and make nice corners. And I use the mesh tape on all the flat seams on the walls and ceilings. So that's pretty much what I'll do. I've got some outside corner edging, you know, installed all around the windows. The windows are just basically drywalled in, basically just drywalled that in, and I'll just caulk against the vinyl window, and that's it. That's all the window's gonna be. Everything looks pretty good, pretty straight. I had to unfortunately do stripping of patch because the wall is a little more than 12 foot. But that drywall crane and everything like that worked well, and you know, I'm pretty happy with the result. Everything looks like it'll be pretty easy to tape up and finish out. So that is the video, and I'm looking forward to show you when I get this all organized, all the tool organization and the finished drywall in the next video. So stay tuned, and I'll see you then.